China's State Council Information Office issued a white paper called China and the World in the New Era. It lays out ambitious aspirations for the country's own development, for engagement with the world, and for the creation of new opportunities, not just for itself, but for a community of enlightened, shared interest. So how has China found its own unique development path? What does its peaceful rise mean for the world? And what's the outlook for the further development of shared opportunity? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Wang Huiyao, President of the Center for China and Globalization, and Atul Aneja, Associate Editor of The Hindu. We'll also speak to Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University via Skype, and to Dr. Yu Jie, Senior Research Fellow on China at Chatham House in London via satellite. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. France is awash with greetings and condolences to pay tribute to their late president. Jacques Chirac, who died at 86, will go down history as a centrist politician who connected with both the right and left in a divided society. He is said to be the only French president whose warm personality based on universal love won huge popularity across the aisle of politics and in the society at large. This is rare and remarkable. He gained admiration as an ordinary man whose jogging and riding Vespas in the back street of Paris would capture headlines. His decades in politics carry strong Gaullist overtones, especially in the transatlantic ties. He deserves credit for rejecting the war on Iraq, and his approval rating soared to 90%, putting Tony Blair to shame. Many Chinese like him because he was well-versed in traditional Chinese culture and our history. He surprised local historians in Wuhan, Hubei province with a sound knowledge of the Sui dynasty, which boasted of 3 emperors instead of 2. CAS researchers were asked to double-check this. Chirac was right, of course. He not only loved the bronze relics, but also the unearthed clay soldiers in Xi'an, and visited the ancient city 3 times as president, but first went there in 1978 as mayor of Paris. Mr. Chirac's charisma was questioned by the last governor of Hong Kong. Nevertheless, Chris Patton says in his book, Not Very Much a Diplomat, that Chirac's body language was as rich as the written language of William Shakespeare. Americans said French fries had become freedom fries after President Chirac aligned himself with Gerhard Schröder, former German chancellor, to criticize the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. Well, we enjoy French fries. No political innuendo can cripple the name of the great politician who passed away at 86. His legacy remains just as the great cathedral Notre Dame de Paris won't be destroyed by accidental flames. Both are towering symbols in our living memories. Bon voyage, and may you rest in peace, Monsieur Chirac. Welcome back to our discussion about the white paper issued by the State Council Information Office. But first of all, what do you think of Jacques Chirac, one of the great European politicians who was able to bring China and Europe closer through his wisdom and sophistication about our history, our culture in the first place?
I think he's probably one of the few Western leaders who has a rapport with Chinese leaders. And he actually, French is also very strong in the soft power and also has a very good connection with China on the cultural and also many aspects. And also his globalist view, I think, in promoting globalization is actually also connects with Chinese leaders. I thought that really is one of the leaders that really strengthened France and also EU relation with China. So he will be remembered by the Chinese people.
He got elected as president of France, the Fifth Republic, in 1995, and he was, of course, able to integrate China with the rest of the world his own way. So, Atul, what do you think?
I think a remarkable figure, not a politician but a statesman, and though quintessentially a European, but his vision went far beyond Europe. You mentioned about his love for China. I can say his love for India, for Asian civilizations as such. And on top of that, a man of deep convictions, as was pointed out earlier, that he took a stand against the Iraq war and faced a lot of criticism from the American, which is very de Gaullean in some sense. So I think overall a personality who will be sorely missed in today's world.
Indeed, a globalist. In fact, I was told that a number of African heads of state sent their condolences to family members of Mr. Jacques Chirac to express their respect, because he is the great politician in France who also brings Africa closer to Europe. Let's look at the paper on China and the world. What are the major points outlined in this paper, the policy paper, ahead of the 70th anniversary of the PRC's founding?
Well, I think this paper is actually probably for the first time in the 70th years anniversary of China that has systematically looked at what has happened in the past 7 decades of the People's Republic, but also more so in terms of in this of a new era of summarize a bit of what has what has done right and what has been really achieved. So I think this is really great. For example, you kind of find a path that is more suitable with Chinese characteristics, but it's also embraced the globalization. It was emphasized the globalization also in this white paper, but also it has proposed a Belt and Road, a more economic scheme that how can China connect with the world. But I think most important is that it really for the first time, China has been able to find out a reasoning behind what are good for China. China is the opportunity for the world. China offers great dividend for the world. So this probably is more so interested to the outside world. The peaceful rise of China is a great opportunity for the world, and also how we can really build this shared community of the mankind. And so this white paper not only emphasizes China, but it's more in a global context, and also in light of the community of the world who are really cannot live without each other.
For at least 4 decades, the rest of the world has been holding its breath, watching out for the rise of China and what it means, and the impact of China's rapid economic expansion. India is our biggest neighboring country. I'd like to have your observations about what the peaceful rise of China means for the world when the issue of globalization comes under severe scrutiny, particularly from populist leaders.
I think it is something so remarkable and stunning, the rise of China. And with the rise of China, we also see the inauguration of a multipolar world. The old world order has already cracked up. And China is one of the major poles of the world now, second largest economy in the world. What it holds for the future is enormous, especially for developing countries, I think, through initiatives of connectivity, Eurasian integration, Belt and Road, as it was mentioned. I think even in a cultural sense, this is extremely important, because for the first time, you're going to have an Asian country as one of the leading powers or influencers in the world. And so this is something which is quite unprecedented if you look at the global history as such. So it's remarkable from more than one sense, and we look forward. I think but there's also a challenge here. How does China manage its rise along with other poles of the world which are around it? And that is something which we have to look at the future, because globalization now is important, but globalization has to be re-articulated in the sense because there has been a dispersion of power. We are no longer in the unipolar moment, and that will be the challenge for the China, along with its enormous opportunities.
Poor economically, but big in size. Back in 1971, China restored its legitimacy at the United Nations, ousting representatives of Taiwan with the majority support of developing countries. Let me go to Jeffrey. Americans started to have a very strong mixed feeling about the rise of China, not just since the presidency of Donald Trump, but I'd like to have your honest comment on impact of China's rise and its relationship with the rest of the world. Jeffrey?
I think China's rise has been enormously beneficial, first for the Chinese people and also for the world. Of course, a world in which China was poor would have been a world of greater instability. The great economic catching up of China during the last 40 years has been both remarkable and broadly beneficial globally. And one of the most important points of this new document is that the Chinese authorities make very clear that China's rise is within the UN Charter. It's within the UN system. I think this is actually the most important point, that China is not seeking hegemony, it's not seeking domination, it has not launched any wars. This is a peaceful rise. Of course, China's rise has now given a strong reaction from the American right wing, from the neoconservatives, who view China as a great threat. And this has provoked this so-called trade war, which is actually an attempt by the neoconservatives in the United States to stop or slow or hinder China's continued development. That's a very bad and dangerous policy by the United States, in my opinion. But what China needs to emphasize globally, and this document does so very effectively, is that China is not a threat. It's not overturning the international system. It is strengthening the UN Charter and the UN-based system, because that's what the whole world wants and needs. And I think this document reinforces that point.
Yes, indeed. The blue team, and particularly newcomers in the United States, are not very happy about the rise of China. Let me go to Professor Yu Jie for her comments on the issue. Why one size can't fit all? China is large in size. Its rise produces global impact. Particularly, the world media focuses on the issue of why China walks a different path. China says in the white paper, the path and the roadmap of our rapid development over the past 4 decades is suitable for our national conditions. I'd like to have your thoughts on why we have made a difference instead of being exactly one of them, one of the Americans, one of the Westerners.
Well, thank you for having me. I felt we should really go back to the word what Chairman Mao was saying, taking the truth from the fact. And obviously, for what the test we have so far, what the pilot study we have so far in the last 40 years, it seems to be that sense of government-led kind of economic plan somehow could really work in China's favor. So if the Chinese people felt somehow this entire reform and opening up and really suit for its own economic future, and why should they actually change a system which is something a very different one? So I would say it's really, by continue to have that sense of economic reform, it is very much really at the end result of the last 40 years of testament. So I wouldn't say, you know, we must have to follow the Western model, whatever the model, because really the world does not really make it up by binary view. Instead, each different country should be looking for the different independent path and for its own economic well-being.
Thank you very much. Now, exactly 40 years ago, when the third plenary session of the 11th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party opened its landmark political event, by the way, a watershed that started China's process of globalization and modernization to open itself up. Henry, 40 years ago, we had this famous sloganeering, such as 实事求是, seeking truth from facts, and other 解放思想, emancipation of the mind. A third, I'm afraid, is touching the stones while crossing the river, 摸着石头过河. It indicates vividly the Chinese uniqueness in shaping our own roadmap, instead of adopting the shock therapy that led to the sharp fall of rubles, the Russian currency, in the early days of the reform. But it's a success in Poland, in the neighborhood of the Russian Federation. Let's look at why we ended up opting for a gradualist approach instead of a shock therapy.
Well, I think this is really quite amazing. I think you outlined all the beginning rationale behind, but I remember one of the famous mottos of Deng Xiaoping is that it doesn't matter if it's a white cat or black cat as long as it catches mice. So I think you know, the world probably needs to give a little bit more you know, acceptance of China. I think the white paper today is also to tell the world, is, look, you know, we have gone through a unique path, but this unique path is embraced with the globalization, with the opening up, And after all, we are living a democracy of 200 countries, of thousands of institutions, UN system, media. Everybody's watching China. But on the other hand, within China itself, China followed a great plan and objective. So the one 5-year plan after another 5-year plan. So this concentrate on the construction and opening up. So China has built the largest network of a high-speed train. Beijing just finished another huge, gigantic airport. So we use the monumental achievement one after another. Just concentrate working on that, and then that's really to prove to the world, look, with the 5,000 years history, with the hardworking attitudes of Chinese people, and also with the Chinese opening up. Let China be the market of the world. So we welcome all the countries, all the multinationals come to China. Now China is going global. China has to contribute to the world by, like through One Belt One Road. But of course, China is not perfect. China still have a lot of things to learn from other countries. So we need the friends of all the world. So I think the message of the shared future of mankind, exactly we should work towards that objective. So I think that one thing about this, the good thing about this white paper is that finally, China is thinking of what we have done right. Maybe together with Chinese culture, with the Chinese characteristics, but also with the global system and with globalization that intertwined with China. So I think this is really unique with the technology as well. With all the good things happening with UN global governance system, China is want to be a promoter and also supporter of that. So all those elements contribute to the success of China.
We can talk for hours and hours about why China is different, why we have been able to create a difference. Now, two.
Yeah.
A lot of critics in the West pointed out many, many years ago, look, it's ridiculous to mix up the planned economy with the market economy. Now, Francis Fukuyama, in the week of the Cold War, said famously, unless we are able to combine liberal democracy with a liberal market economy, not a single major economy would prevail, but China is an exception, of course. So, what do you think of the uniqueness of the Chinese policy making, which is known for years, for the 5-year planning, ever since the founding of the PRC 70 years ago. And many Americans marvel at the ability of the Chinese Communist Party in execution of its consistent policy from the very first 5-year plan 70 years ago.
Yeah.
Is that very different from Western policy making process?
Absolutely, because first thing is, which stands out for me, is the level of Chinese self-confidence. And that is not something which has come now. You are a very deep civilization. And this 5,000 history, where you were the largest economy in the world at one point of time, gives you tremendous strength in terms of your standards which you set for yourself. I think that is something which has come historically to you. And that gives also a sense of boldness to experiment. Now, the very fact, the communist system or the socialist revolution of China, though it has been inspired by the Soviet Union and others in the Comintern, well, it was in an agricultural society. But there was a huge experiment which was done here, that here's a country which is primarily agriculture, but has to adopt a model which has elements of what it got from the West, but adapted to the Chinese system. And then came the 30 years of experimentation. And from there you learned and went into reforms. I think this spirit of boldness, inquiry, experimentation and learning, that has led to this unique model, this hybrid model which you talk about. Because the planned economy system of the Soviet Union didn't work. And China retained the 5-year plans. But the other element which was added to it was to improve efficiency. You needed the market. So it's not entirely what critics would say a capitalist system. It isn't. And that's why you call it a socialist market economy, because you extracted the market element, but the political control did not go to the capitalists. It still remained with the party and the state. Now, this is something fantastic, and that, I think, is the core or the foundation for China's remarkable economic rise, which follows thereafter. I think that particular spirit of inquiry and experimentation continues. And I think as we enter another phase of globalization, there will be creativity coming from China as to how globalization and social justice have to go together.
But the Secretary General of the United Nations warned of a possible fracture, namely a parallel order of the world economy due to the trade war initiated unilaterally by Donald Trump. Let me go to Jeffrey. Late senior leader Deng Xiaoping,
Yes,
architect of China's opening up and reform, decided to set up special economic zones in the coastal areas, and in those places, successful experiments were conducted with the alleged capitalist market economy. Nevertheless, under the Chinese Communist leadership, of course. Look at Shenzhen, look at the newly established Grand Bay Area that connects Hong Kong, Macau, with the 9 cities in Guangdong province in the Pearl River Delta region. Now, these notions are quite interesting, very Chinese. These are yet another major step in the correct direction in Chinese perspective. What do you think of our enormous efforts to toy with the market economy under the communist leadership, planning and market economy at the same time?
I would make a couple of points looking backward and one major point looking forward. First, China in 1978, with the opening, was extraordinarily poor. It was rural, agricultural, impoverished. What has happened in the succeeding 40 years is rapid catching up. So this has been a particular phase of history of catching up. Many things were done very well. The public sector built the infrastructure, which is vital, the highways, the power, the rest of the transport and communications networks. This was a tremendous contribution. Second is this has been a mixed model, but that's not unique, I must say, because successful economies such as those in Germany or Northern Europe are also mixed economies. They were not facing the same challenge that China faced during the last 40 years, because China was catching up, while the mixed economies of Northern Europe were already high-income countries. But the notion of a mixed economy should be understood as a desirable feature, and China has a mixed system of state and market, but so too the Scandinavia or Germany. And this is a part of successful development. A third point, though, looking forward, is that we are in a new phase. Of course, China has completed a substantial part of the catching up, and it is now a technological innovator. This is a very important development, a very good development for China, and as the report points out, for the world, because these technologies will benefit the world. But we are also in a crucial new phase of sustainable development, where economic development must be combined with environmental measures to stop the global warming, to stop the air pollution and the water pollution. And here China has very significant work to do, because China is, in fact, very polluted. It needs to clean the air. It has been doing that. It needs to move to a renewable energy system, not alone, but for the whole world. And together with the whole world. China has a wonderful initiative called the Global Energy Interconnection, GuideCo, which says that the whole world should be linked with renewable energy, a great idea which I strongly support. But my point is that looking forward, yes, it will be a mixed economy, and yes, it should be an economy of sustainable development that combines prosperity, social justice, and environmental cleanup and environmental sustainability. And I believe that China will be a great leader of sustainable development.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey, for sharing your confidence and caution about the future of China. Let me go to Professor Yu Jie. We are facing multiple challenges, such as the aging population, the left behind the children, environmental decline, and above all, the downward economic pressure. So the issue of unemployment would somehow look like a major threat to social stability. This year, we have to fix a big number of up to 11 million job seekers, and opening up of the capital market, for example, a capital account. So what do you think is the most important challenge? And some would say the reform of SOE to promote its efficiency and to promote the general productivity of the Chinese enterprises would first and foremost be the most important priority on the agenda of this generation of the communist leadership. What do you think should be prioritized on the agenda next?
Well, I mean, everything you have listed are pretty much the most important subjects, far more important than any tweet sent by the man who occupied the White House at the moment, anyway. So my consideration would be, I think stabilizing the employment is the absolute essential to bring up the societal stability, because by stabilizing the employment, and you can really make sure the society felt they're really part of this economic success. Because in the last 40 years, yes, we are absolutely has achieved so much in terms of staggering economic growth. But the price what we have paid is that sense of huge regional disparity. And a certain part of the population felt somehow they are left behind. So by providing some kind of higher employment figure, and this would make people felt, okay, yes, we are also tied into that part of the successful story as well. So I think absolutely stabilizing the employment is the priority. Now, when it comes to state-owned enterprises reform and capital account opening, it is not just depending on China itself, but it's also depending on whether the international environment, international economic environment, will be able to provide China that sense of a condition to open up itself, open for the economy. I mean, if we're talking about renminbi internationalization, and we really have to judge how volatile the international market would be. So once we open the capital account, and are we really be prepared to bearing the pressure of the market volatility as well?
Thank you very much, Harry. Very quickly, Harry, and Atu, very quickly. Internally, we have the middle income trap. Externally, the Thucydides trap, so to speak. It seems it's no easy job for President Xi and his comrades in Politburo to lead this country out of these traps and adverse situation. Very quickly, what do you think should be the silver lining?
Well, I think that China, you know, by looking back past 7 decades and looking beyond next 7 decades or 4 decades, is actually China has a lot of things to have a new impetus that China is finding. For example, technology. Now, and also the best infrastructure in the world. You know, now you have the total length of a speed railway in China is equal to the next 10 countries combined. And China has a 1.2 billion smartphone users. Everybody has a small ERP and greatly enhanced the productivity. And also China now has all those, you know, the younger generation, 170 million talents have education of college. And also China now become the biggest market of the world. We have 400 million middle-class buyers, and in the next 10, 15 years we could have 800 million.
But I'm afraid all of these advantages will be viewed as a threat to the United States. If you look at why trade war is looming larger.
No, that's what I'm saying. You know, the market, the global value chain center that China is creating is going to benefit all the countries, including the United States. So as President Trump pushed for this decoupling, but I think, you know, in the end, people will felt, look, we cannot ignore a huge market like China, and we have to live with China together.
It's an easy job to decouple the Chinese market. Atu, is that true?
Yeah, that's impossible. But from the Chinese perspective, I can say that it has to build more friends around among the multipolar world. I can see civilizations here. The Russian Orthodox civilization. The Russians will be important. The Indian Indo-Islamic. It has its cultural space in Southeast Asia. So you have to have poles within the multipolar world, and China should pursue a collegiate sort of approach to carry everyone along. And then I think you have enough sort of a layer around you to counter the threats which adversaries.
All the disputes and differences between China and other major powers, at least European Union, China, and India, stand for multilateralism as opposed to unilateral policy moves by the White House. And I think that's a blessing for the future of the whole world and China. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.